Ladies and gentlemen, the fire at Yosemite National Park is still going on, and the sequoias are dying. So, the only solution they have, because they can't put this thing out, y'all, they have tried a multitude of things. They cannot put this thing out. So, they're now resorting to, and I did a video on this earlier, and they are still cutting down as many trees as possible. And we know this is all for profit, but they're trying to convince us that it's to save the trees from completely burning up, but they are. These sequoias, which were once fire resistant, they are not anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, they are saying some of these trees are so old, they were around during the Roman Empire. That's how far back some of these trees have been alive. We know trees can live a long time, they really can. So I have some audio from the Washington Post that I want you to listen to.
This news story was written by Josh Partlow. California's giant sequoias are burning up. Will logging save them? In Yosemite National Park, a fight over how to protect the world's largest trees in a warming world. Kings Canyon National Park, California. Every June, Tony Caprio and his wife Linda hike into the Sugar Bowl, a cluster of giant sequoias high in the Sierra Nevada, to admire the profusion of wildflowers and walk among some of the oldest and tallest trees on the planet. Now when he visits, he sees something that, scientists say, has no precedent in thousands of years of history: vast acres of dead sequoias, killed by fire. The Sugar Bowl, an amphitheater of solemn and enormous trees, part of the Redwood Mountain Grove, one of the largest collections of giant sequoia on Earth, has become a graveyard. Trees that have lived since the Roman Empire stand as fire-blackened matchsticks, their once bushy green crowns shriveled into charred fists. When the KMP complex fire roared through last October, it burned so hot in some places that Caprio expects few seedlings to rise from the ash. "These are all dead," said Caprio, the fire ecologist for Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks, wandering among the grove now closed to the public. "So what's going to be the long-term prognosis for an area like this? Is it going to come back as a shrub field?" Summer wildfires, in the era of climate change, mean something different now for giant sequoias. These trees evolved with fire and needed to reproduce, but the scale of recent megafires, burning in hotter, drier conditions across far greater areas, have overwhelmed many of the groves tucked high in the California mountains. 6 of the 7 largest wildfires in California history have occurred in the past 2 years, and in that period, up to nearly 1/5 of all naturally occurring large giant sequoias on Earth have been killed. What is new and shocking is these large areas, 100 acres or more, where every single sequoia is killed, said Nate Stevenson, an emeritus scientist in forest ecology at the U.S. Geological Survey. There is no evidence anything like that has happened in the past 1,000 years, probably many thousands of years. "We're in a whole new ballgame," he said. "And in this new game, the rules are in dispute." The question of how to protect the remaining sequoias, and more broadly how to manage America's remaining forests in an era of climate-magnified megafires, has divided scientists and the public. The 2 wildfires that burned in and around Yosemite National Park this summer, including among the famous Mariposa Grove of sequoias, rekindled the debate about what humans can or should do to protect these iconic trees. Across the parched West, the Biden administration and its public land managers want to dramatically ramp up controlled fires and logging as a way to thin out fuel-packed forests and avoid deadly wildfires. Earlier this year, the Biden administration announced a decade-long, $50 billion plan to use logging and prescribed fire across 50 million acres in 11 western states to manage wildfire. Late last month, the U.S. Forest Service said it would take emergency action, including setting fires and cutting down trees, to try to protect a dozen sequoia groves over more than 13,000 acres. Legislation proposed in June, called the Save Our Sequoias Act, would fast-track environmental reviews for these types of logging and firework in the name of fire prevention. The scale of what some foresters and researchers are calling for in places such as the Sierra Nevada amounts to a wholesale re-engineering of the forest. They say the land management policy that prevailed during much of the 20th century, of putting out most wildfires, has led to overgrown forests. During the past 2 decades, as climate change has intensified, drought in the west has killed many of those trees, leaving downed logs and dead snags, the fuels that firefighters say create hotter and more destructive wildfires. Before colonists settled the West, forest fires caused by lightning, and set routinely by Native Americans, helped thin out forests. Back then, it was typical to have about 50 trees per hectare in the Sierra Nevada and Southern Cascades, whereas now some forests have 300 to 400 trees per hectare, according to Alexis Bernal, a researcher with the University of California, Berkeley who studies giant sequoias. Extensive logging is needed to reverse that, she said, coupled with more fire. We want to get a forest back to what a fire-resilient landscape would look like, she said. You would have to take out a lot of these trees to do that. Caprio said roughly 30,000 acres per year used to burn naturally in Sequoia and Kings Canyon, while the park only accomplishes about 3,000 acres in prescribed burning each year. That gives you an idea of the deficit, he said. But some environmentalists and residents are wary of escalating forest management and doubt that human intervention can contain wildfire on the scale and intensity it now rages. They worry about prescribed fires escaping their boundaries and logging projects that offer little resistance to flames fanned by a hotter and drier world. Two prescribed burns set by the U.S. Forest Service that grew out of control earlier this year caused unfathomable destruction in New Mexico, as Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, Democrat, put it, destroying hundreds of homes, displacing thousands, and threatening water supplies in a burn area larger than Los Angeles. Logging projects in the name of thinning and fire prevention have also been challenged in lawsuits up and down the West Coast. Environmental groups are fighting to preserve a rule that prohibited cutting large trees on public land in Oregon. Local governments in California, along with retailer Patagonia, sued the Forest Service to block logging for fire defense on Pine Mountain, a popular recreation area. Climate change has caused hotter and drier conditions that have pushed the peak of U.S. wildfire season earlier in the summer, July rather than August in recent decades. The season has also lengthened and fires have burned more total acreage. Since 1983, when federal records began, more than 10 million acres have burned in only 3 years, but all of them have happened since 2015. Just last year, wildfires destroyed nearly 6,000 homes and other buildings, one-third of those were in California. Yosemite and the giant sequoias have been a flashpoint in the debate even before the Washburn and Oak fires, the two fires in and around Yosemite, ignited last month. An effort to cut down trees across more than 2,000 acres inside the national park was challenged in a lawsuit in federal court by the Earth Island Institute, an environmental group based in Berkeley, California. Last month, a judge temporarily halted what the park calls a biomass removal project. The architect of Yosemite's prescribed fire and thinning projects is Garrett Dickman, a biologist and firefighter whose job is to protect the park's famed sequoias. Forests in his jurisdiction are often densely packed with understory vegetation and downed trees. It's logs, and then logs on top of logs, and then logs on top of logs, he said. We call them jackpots. There's just jackpots everywhere. The drumbeat of massive fires torching the Sierra Nevada and killing sequoias led Yosemite to devise a plan to cut down trees along certain road corridors, primarily to give firefighters more room to operate. The thinning is right where the firefighters are going to stand, he said. If you don't do that, you can't stand there. It's too hot. Dickman is aware that the cutting of any trees in a national park is a serious decision. I don't want to run heavy equipment all over this whole thing, he said. But running it along the road systems or running it in communities, that's the kind of compromise that we needed to do in order to get good fire on the ground and prevent the bad fires. This is unacceptable. Chad Hansen climbed onto a stump that was more than 5 feet across. He knelt down and ran his hand slowly across the tree rings. All around him were stumps, hundreds of freshly cut firs and pines in the Merced Grove inside Yosemite. Logs by the dozen had been stacked in piles, ready for removal to be sold for lumber or burned in power plants for electricity.
And see, y'all, that is the point. I'm going to stop it right there. That is the point. With those trees going up in flames, they see their profit going up in flames too. And look, this thing has gone on for a long time and they still can't put it out, y'all. You got to look at the triple digit temperatures on top of the fire and how dry the environment is. That has been a huge problem this entire time. And think about it. Those trees, they said some of them are as old that goes back to when the Roman Empire was ruling the world. So, I mean, you're talking about a long time. These trees have had a long life. Many of the big, tall ones, they've been around for centuries. So now you're losing all of that. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen, we are in the final days. Maybe the Most High don't want them to put these fires out. Maybe they don't, maybe he don't want them to do, rescue people during these natural disasters. I mean, think about it. We're in the last days. And these folks are on stolen land. He's not going to let them fix what they messed up on this stolen land. He'll push them out of here before he allows them to correct a wrong that's going on. But what we have seen over the last few years are people that really have no ability of fixing these forest fires, and they burn for weeks and weeks and weeks. And y'all remember Paradise in California, the entire town burned down. The whole town, there was hardly nothing left. They couldn't put that thing out no more than they can put out this Yosemite fire. And if you notice, every time America goes through a natural disaster, it is really a hard recovery or no recovery at all, especially if people lose their homes and everything. They ultimately got to relocate. But please tell me what you think about what's going on. This fire's still going strong, and the only solution they got is to keep cutting down the trees so that they can profit on whatever's not burning. That's how I see it. Now they're saying, "Oh, we need room for this and room for that." No, that's why you're selling that wood and you're going to use it to burn. You're using the wood for profit, and that's what it's all about. Now, I think that's all the cutting is. They've been cutting since July, and maybe even before then, to get this fire under control, and they still don't have it under control. So we know that's not the answer, and I think they know it's not the answer either. But y'all, please tell me what you think about this story. So the Roman Empire, and we know the Roman Empire fell. Isn't that symbolic? Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace, family.